is the CrimeCasters Network with Alysia Sofios and Ronnie Dahl. Two rogue reporters breaking newsroom rules to take you behind the crime scene tape.
Grab a glass, get comfortable. This is the part of the show that we take you behind the scenes. Alysia, I can't believe that detective said what he said, but also went on the record.
I just would like to take a deep breath because that is what, it's just so refreshing to, oftentimes we'll hear that stuff behind the scenes, right? Off the record, you can't say anything but this is so refreshing to actually have them come out and say this. And I understand why, because he's not the only one. Several detectives I talked to said the exact same thing. One went on the record also, and one hasn't gone on the record yet, and we'll talk about that in a minute. They say the same thing. It's been 20 years. It is time. They're like, what do we have to lose at this point? So
can we talk about, though, them actually saying his name? Mm-hmm. Typically, it is a huge no-no to name a suspect unless they have been charged. Now, there are certain times that they can do that, such as if they feel like the person is an immediate danger to society.
Of course, but Ronnie, they didn't do this. They didn't do this back then. They tiptoed around it. They said, here's the famous line they said all the time. We started in the center of the circle like you do, and we were never able to get out. That's all they would say. And Artis is the one who came out and said, I'm the main suspect. I mean, he's not dumb. He knew. He's in law enforcement. He continued working at MSP until just a few years ago when he retired.
Because I wasn't in Lansing when this case happened. I think I came later. Did you guys name Artis, or did you wait until Artis named himself?
He named himself right away. Police said that he's a person of interest. You know how they do that. The husband is always a person of interest. But to be clear, Artis White, I want to say this, it's important. He maintains his innocence. He's never been charged with a crime.
He took it to extremes, though.
He took it to extremes. He said that it's been very difficult for his family, as you can imagine, and I want to talk about the girls in a minute, but he said this has been very difficult, and he said that he spent years trying to prove to anyone who would listen that he didn't do it, and now he feels like he doesn't need, he says the people closest to him, the people who love him, the people he really cares about know the truth, and that's good enough for him. He doesn't owe anyone anything. He said he's had a hard time with all of this.
Well, if you are truly innocent, it has to be a lot of pressure on you, how you live day to day, but also in the eyes of your kids. How do you address that? And we understand, people say they're innocent. OJ still says he's innocent, but this guy wrote a book.
Oh, a lot of people have drawn comparisons to that because who killed my wife? It just is, it's hard because he knew he was a suspect and he wrote a book, Who Killed My Wife? And then he made a documentary. First, let's talk about the kids. Alana and Michaela. The Bernita's family still has a relationship with them. They're doing wonderfully. I've looked at their pictures on Facebook. They're absolutely stunning women. One of them looks just like Bernita. Wow. It's so difficult. I can't imagine what that's like to look in the mirror and see so many similarities to your mom. And to be fair, this is all they've ever known. They were so young when this happened that they've grown up with this. And they do believe their father is innocent. And they don't want to talk about it anymore. And so, you know, sometimes we cover these cases and the families are like beating down the door. We want to talk. We want to talk. Alana and Michaela are not interested right now. And Artis is done talking, he says.
What's going to be interesting to me is, as this case, it seems like at this point, it is getting new attention.
Absolutely.
How is that going to impact Artis and his kids?
Right. And I know that they have, you know, media has contacted them. I'm not the only one. Yeah. So people are speaking with them and they're coming out and they're having to address it. Now, the documentary we mentioned was called Living Accused. And at that time, he teamed up with a few other people who had been named as suspects. Many of them were incarcerated for years and then exonerated and had to come out of it. And they spoke about that. He hosted it and kind of drew connections to his own story, his personal story. He produced it, he directed it, and when he released it, there was that like premiere, and his girls were there. They were like helping with merchandise and posing for pictures with the newspaper. A lot of people didn't like that, but they continue to support him. I spoke with one of Bernita's best friends, and she says that on top of losing her best friend, it's very difficult for her to know that the girls are out there and may not have all of the stories about their mother.
Yeah.
And she said she literally prays every day that Alana and Michaela will pick up a phone and call her and ask about their mother to her, because she said she wants them to come forward, and she just has all of these things in her heart that she wants to share with them. And that would be very difficult, because every person, Bernita's family will say the same thing, they all had their own relationship with Bernita. And when you put all of those stories together is when you get the full person of who she is. So it's hard.
Yeah, and you could see, like, your best friend knows things about you that no one else
Completely. And you're more candid, and you may be more willing to speak. In this case, she didn't tell her family everything that was happening behind closed doors.
Right.
She told her friends. And they were the ones who went forward right away and said, artist did it. Her friends were the ones that came forward first. So
Let's talk about the case. Where is
Yes.
it today? So
Well-
we mentioned that it's being re-examined.
it's absolutely being re-examined right now. And to give you a little history, Lansing police presented this case twice. As I mentioned, they presented it twice to Ingham County prosecutor, who happened to go to jail after that for his own crimes.
Google him.
Yeah. So then after that
Colorful.
happened, very colorful story. After that happened, Michigan State Police took it to the Attorney General's office. It really kind of died. Nothing was happening with it. And then during our investigation, we reapproached the Michigan State Police. Detective Sergeant Jeff Frazier is in charge of the case now. He was able to represent the case to the Attorney General's office again. He was talking a lot, if you'll remember. He was going to go on the record. Everything was all set up. And then the plug got pulled, and he was not able to speak with us anymore on camera, which is difficult.
Right.
Because, you're getting all this information. Somebody told him not to talk anymore. And so he was able to issue our listeners a statement. And he says, currently the case is being looked at by the new administration of the Attorney General's office. I feel the case is in a good spot, as we have never been this far before.
Well, I can
It's a
tell
bold
you
statement.
who probably told him not to talk, and that would be the AG's office, because sometimes when you work with law enforcement, like for me, I was the PIO.
Right.
You could talk, but then it starts to go up the chain, and other people learn
Catch
things,
wind of it.
and then it's like, okay, we're shutting this down.
Yeah, this is a big deal. I've been trying to get information on this case for 20 years, just like her family. And it at some point, you have to say, I'm going to take this case. You have to take a risk on it. And to be clear, they are taking the case against Artist White to the Attorney General's office. That has been their case that they've taken. They even went to a cold case symposium one time in Ohio and presented the case. And all of the police officers there voted, yes, you have enough, take it. But it just hasn't gotten as far as it is today. Now,
and people should know too, when they're trying to make that decision, the detective may think there is enough, but it's really up to the prosecutor to
people who
make
actually
that
have to stand in the courtroom and
decision.
present the case.
Exactly.
Because of course you may want it to go, but if you can't win in court, there's no reason to take it. I have seen a lot of the evidence in this case file, and we'll talk about the case file in a minute. I truly believe, and the detectives say, that the mound of circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. And circumstantial evidence often it's supposed to be always treated the exact same way as any other evidence. Now, jurors may not do that. I took you out to the zoo. We talk about the time. It all comes back to the timeline, right?
Right.
So I took you out to the zoo. We wandered around. We tried to see exactly where police decided that they think the shooter was. And then the detective took me back out and showed me exactly. And I actually did the whole trip that they believe Artist did. They believe that he said, okay, I'm going to pick up Alana, pick you guys back up later, got into his car, drove on a service drive that is literally connected to the zoo, got out, walked into the field, laid down, only about 100 yards away. I actually laid down, held out, pretended to take a shot. Nobody could see me. Nobody could hear me. I know you're looking at the zoo, how it's laid out there. We'll put that up on our website. And so you can see the wooded area, and it has changed over the years, obviously. But back then, there was a straight shot, and we talk about that one shot a lot. Detectives at the time, I really believed it had to have been like a trained marksman or someone in the military. We kept coming back to that. And in fact, the DC Sniper Task Force actually looked into this case at one point.
Right.
Because it was associated with being a sniper. They completely ruled it out. And they do believe 100% that she was targeted. But detectives have since told me that that shot was not as crazy as we thought it was. They said anyone trained on a rifle at all, with any knowledge, with that scope, could have taken that shot and been as accurate as the gunman was. When we come down to suspects, though, everyone's like, well, did you look at other suspects? Who are they? That's been their criticism. That's been Artis's criticism of them. But who knew that Bernita was going to be at the zoo that day? You have a very small amount of people. It was 100% targeted. They know that. So who was at the zoo that knew she was going to be there? And who had a motive?
It was Artis. I feel like because of that tight window of time, he had to plan this out.
So Potter Park and Delta Mills Park are about 10 miles apart. It takes about 20 minutes. People saw him at Delta Mills about 20 minutes after he left Potter Park. But when we did the reenactment with police, it literally took us 2 minutes to drive around, get out of the car, aim, take the shot, get back in the car, drive away. And they came back to the GPS. Artis always talks about the GPS in the vehicle.
Right.
He would never have had, it's a service drive, he would never have had to leave the zoo. It would have looked like he was just on the same path. The other thing that he brings up often, the cell phone. This was 2001. Do you remember cell phones back then? Do you remember the cell phones we had at the newsroom? It was like, you pay by the minute. You don't just call and chat to your friend. Our news director was like, you guys have 30 seconds to talk on your call. Yeah. And it's like, you're like, hey, I need a photographer. But you like are yelling it out because you paid a lot of money.
You would get those phone bills and they'd be like $300 or $400 and you're like,
I know, it was crazy. But the point is, his alibi is that he was on the phone the whole time. He made a call, the person didn't answer, he left not a voicemail, an answering machine, a message on the answering machine.
Right.
And then he made another call and talked to that guy all the way to the zoo. Isn't that a little strange? The cell phone thing has always been kind of a big one for me.
Can we talk about the FOIA?
Okay. So this brings us back to the case file, the circumstantial evidence, and I'm telling you, again, over the years, I have looked at this case file off and on, right? But I wanted the entire thing because we're doing a deep dive into this case. And so I put in the FOIA, and it comes back. Price tag, $42,000. That's how big this case is. Of course, I was like, I want it, but not quite $42,000. By the way, we have a FOIA fund on our website if anyone would like to contribute. So, but I decided to cherry pick the things that I knew I wanted. I knew about that letter, the infamous letter with the big black box. I knew I wanted that. I knew I wanted 911 calls. I knew I wanted several things and everything. I wanted police interviews. Mm-hmm. I wanted the things that we normally get on a cold case and are granted. My request was approved. Then a few months later, I'm like, where is it? I check in on it. I finally get a message. Okay, your FOIA is in. You can download your documents from the portal. I ran over to my laptop, logged onto that portal, downloaded everything, opened it up, just waiting for and it was a bunch of blank pages. And I was like, excuse me? So I call the clerk's office.
Did they charge you for those, by the way?
Absolutely. I already had paid. I'd already paid. You pay 50%.
Yeah.
Tell everyone what a FOIA is first.
Yeah, so Freedom of Information Act, it allows everyday citizens, not just reporters, not just attorneys, but you and I to request public documents. But
And you're the expert.
They-
You request everything.
I do.
So
I
you know.
FOIA, just a little trick out there, I FOIA the FOIAs. So
I didn't even know you could do this. Like,
Yeah.
my mind was blown when I heard this.
So
You can
then
FOIA the FOIA.
You can FOIA the other FOIAs or list of their FOIAs because then you know what other people are looking into
I mean.
or working on. But it really is an important tool. But at the end of the day, these are public documents. There are documents, but there is a cost associated with it.
Okay, so I pay the money, I download the stuff, it's empty, I call the clerk, and they're like, didn't you get that other letter that we sent you? And I was like, what letter? So she sends it, I read it. Your request has been denied. I was like, excuse me? That doesn't make any sense. This is a 20-year-old cold case. Have you ever had a FOIA rescinded that was approved and paid for?
I have had cold cases denied.
Well, yeah.
But not approved, then denied.
That's very strange.
Yeah.
Very strange. In fact, if we were with a news organization, our lawyer would definitely follow up on that.
Right.
Appeal
and
that.
there's actually a good side to that, though, in that it appears the reason why they then denied it is because they are now taking another look at the case.
It was the exact same time that I got the message that that Detective Frazier was not able to speak with me any further about this or any other case. So there is well, I had another case I wanted to talk to him about, but he was probably afraid I was going to ask him about this, sneak it in somehow. But I mean, listen, I've been on a mission for 20 years. I want to know why this case has never been taken into a courtroom. The family needs justice. Bernita's father died. Benny, man, he was a character. And the Detective Sergeant Larner says Benny called every day.
Wow.
And he sometimes multiple times a day, and was just like, come on. He knew. Benny knew. And so he died not having any justice. But man, the family's still fighting. Everyone's still fighting. Anyway, the FOIA comes up. They did give me a couple little things, including, the black boxes, which I wish we could, hold up to the light and figure out some way. But I
did do that, by the way, when I first got it.
I also got some 911 calls that you'll be happy about. It goes something like this. Hi, I'd like to report a shooting at the zoo. Silence. 90 seconds goes by. Okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye. They redacted the 911 calls.
Yeah.
I mean, something's going on. So we just hope that this is because there is new life in this investigation. Her family's been through it all. They still have hope, but they've been through so many ups and downs, and I have to believe the pressure on Artis and his family is probably mounting as well. This is a hot button issue, and it is getting heated again.
And you can guarantee that his old MSP buddies have let him know that they're looking into this case again.
I absolutely know that he knows about it.
So with that, we want to know what you think. Join us in on this conversation. Check out our social media.